Welcome to Business Spotlight on Money Radio WPSE. Business Spotlight is heard weekly at this time on 1450 AM and 107.1 FM. Today's guest is Yuriy Ostapyak, Chief Operating Officer at Logistics Plus. Yuriy, thanks so much for joining us. It's been nearly a year since we last had you on the Business Spotlight. Could you remind our listeners who you are and what your role is with Logistics Plus?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me again. I currently oversee all of the global operations for Logistics Plus. And it's been another year of growth for us, and we are currently in 35 different countries. We have, close to 45 offices all over the world. And, just kind of continuing to grow a lot in many different aspects of our business, ranging from just freight forwarding to kind of more strategic supply chain management sides.
One of the hottest topics right now is the coronavirus. So I have to ask you, how has this impacted Logistics Plus and its customers?
Coronavirus had a tremendous impact on our business, on global business, and, just overall on the economy as well, in the global economy. And what kind of started out with as a kind of a small disruption is now growing into a bigger and bigger and bigger global disruption with no end in sight. And it's been extremely difficult to predict its path. It's been extremely difficult to predict how it will affect capacity. It's been, very, very sort of reactive, as there seemed to be a few weeks back. The Chinese government mostly had the virus under control, and it looked like it might not reach the level of the pandemic that everyone was fearing about. And just over the last week or so, there has been some major changes. 50 different countries have reported some type of a virus in, specifically in those countries. Some of them cannot specifically trace the origin of the virus. And what it does, it's, the biggest, area that it affects is global supply chain. And, it affects capacity. A lot of the airlines are canceling flights. A lot of countries are closing borders. And the nature of the global economy is that a lot of the big manufacturers worldwide and in the United States, they run just-in-time inventory, and they are simply running out of products and running out of parts. And, because of the closing of entire provinces in China, and because there is, quarantine for, a lot of the drivers and a lot of the rural areas, the effects are tremendous. And some of our largest, Fortune 50 companies and manufacturers are severely impacted by that. And it's not like it's easy for them to either shift manufacturing, or it's not like it's very easy for them to just, adjust on the fly. A lot of these companies have very precise and very complex manufacturing and entire supply chain. So a disruption such as this, they're prepared to withstand, let's say, 2, 3, 4 weeks of delays at the most. Now that it's dragging on longer and longer with no end in sight, there is potential severe complications to their supply chains, and certain large consequences to them, financially.
Yuriy, have you noticed more nervousness towards the virus recently?
Yeah, no, there's definitely shifts. I think there's people starting to realize that you cannot just simply contain this. And although in many different instances, whether it's governments or regions thought to have it contained, but it continues to appear in other areas. And, that's the issue with the whole globalization. You can have a certain carrier that's a certain virus carrier that's asymptomatic, infect and connect through many different countries, many different airports, and spread the disease. So to be honest with you, I think right now the biggest issue is that nobody really knows. There is even the so-called experts. A lot of the the points that they're making are either speculations or kind of best guesses. But there's been a lot of kind of conflicting information. But I think that now majority of let's say the world is coming to a realization that this is not going to be easily contained, and it will impact, the world and supply chain and manufacturing over the next few months.
You have offices and employees in China, don't you? How are they faring?
They're faring well. What we've done is we've obviously tried to minimize the exposure to our employees. So after the mandatory longer period for the Chinese New Year, we've also instructed a lot of our employees to work from home. They are set up with laptops and set up with all the necessary equipment to effectively work from home. And that's what they've been doing. But, a lot of other companies are also working from home, but a lot of the government organizations are not necessarily working. So, the workloads themselves are just, significantly reduced because there just isn't that much freight currently moving. So, there's a very large backlog that's accumulating. So as soon as the virus is somewhat under control and kind of the floodgates open, it's going to be all hands on deck, and we feel it's going to be a very tough time. And what we are trying to do is, rather than just sit and wait until that time, we want to be very proactive. We want to make sure that we are advising our customers. We want to make sure that we are planning on contingency plans. We want to make sure that we are reserving capacity in advance. And we want to make sure that we are not reactive to say, okay, now it's ready to ship and there's, nothing available. We want to make sure that we kind of, stay on top of this and come up with plans and come up with the proper, procedures to, as soon as the restrictions are lifted, that our customers can benefit the most from, having that pre-reserved capacity and having the ability to get their parts into their manufacturing facilities as quickly as possible.
Logistics Plus always prides itself on customer service. I would imagine there is more dialogue going on between LP and their customers right now, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. And, one other point that I wanted to make is that, believe it or not, there's been a certain level of what helped some of the U.S. manufacturers, specifically with, the early effects of coronavirus, are actually the Trump tariffs. And when Trump introduced a lot of the tariffs and the administration introduced all the trade restrictions, it forced quite a few of the big manufacturers to either shift some of their manufacturing facilities from China or diversify and add additional manufacturing facilities. So, as China kind of largely shut down due to coronavirus, some of them already had their manufacturing facilities in, Vietnam and Thailand and Malaysia because they were trying to bypass the Trump tariff. So kind of, indirectly, this helped certain manufacturers to actually be able to, to be able to continue with supply of some of their parts and, have the ability to keep their production lines open. So that's that's one of the, the benefits that I'm sure that nobody was was able to predict, but the way it just worked out with timing is that, few of these companies benefited from those tariffs, but in a very indirect manner.
Do you have any other thoughts or examples of how your customers are coping with this global epidemic and the strain it is placing on their supply chains?
Yeah, and kind of as I've told you, one of our big, one of the big things that we want to do is to basically help our customers to, to be successful and minimize their losses during this time. So we are currently exploring everything from even chartering aircraft. So if we have multiple customers and their freight is ready, but there's no capacity on normal cargo airplanes and normal passenger airplanes because, at a point when certain supply chain and certain entire production lines shut down, some of the customers here are willing to pay whatever. So all the capacity gets bought out by large organizations, and a lot of the smaller ones are not able to get their freight into the country. So what we're trying to do is kind of find ways, and those ways could be, instead of flying it to U.S., flying it to other Southeast Asia countries and then connecting them to Europe and maybe then to U.S., or even hiring charter aircraft where we can then load, let's say, freight for 10, 15 different customers to make a full aircraft and fly it to, United States and then deconsolidate and deliver. So we're trying to think way out of the box. We are trying to be very proactive because we understand that, our customers are struggling, and we understand that a lot of them will not be able to, produce their parts without raw material or their sub-assembly parts. So, a lot of emphasis in our entire organization is being put on, how to help these customers succeed and how to help them overcome this big obstacle.
Yuriy, if the epidemic fear is more prolonged than expected, what are the greatest fears from LP's perspective?
Well, honestly, the greatest fear is how this will actually impact the economy long term. And, something like that can very easily push the economy into a recession. And, depending on how long it is could, really affect of how long the recession will last. And although the stock market is, it crashed and then it recovered and then it's slightly down today, the market is very, very volatile. So kind of the more flights get canceled, the more trade kind of gets restricted because of this, the movement of people, the spending in the economy. A lot more people are staying in. A lot of the automotive factories are completely closed. People are not going out to buy cars like they used to. So, it's the back end effects. It's the back end effects of based on the consumers, based on production, that could put the economy into a tailspin and into a recession that could be a long term or a short term. Very hard to say. But that is kind of our fear, is about just the overall economic slowdown, less freight moving, and just kind of, the economy, going into a minor or a major recession.
As the head of global operations for Logistics Plus, anything new as it relates to import, export, and warehousing activities around the world? Also, is there anything new to report regarding your operations outside of the United States?
Yeah, absolutely. As we kind of continue to grow as a company, and as we continue to and being kind of a more strategic supply chain provider rather than just a transportation company, we've been doing a lot of work in the cloud space. We are moving a lot of the servers to various data centers all over the world that provide cloud space. Been doing a lot of kind of a higher tech white glove service, where Logistics Plus not only moves the product, but also provides certain levels of configuration, certain levels of customization, where we kind of do the whole cradle to the grave type logistics, where it's, where we're not just moving something from A to B, picking it up in one location, delivering to the other, but where, the freight arrives into our warehouses. There is value adds, there is additional, whether it's, hardware or software configurations that are done by us and then delivered to the end customer, and then kind of managing that entire cycle. So really a lot of growth for us specifically on that more strategic, it's called the 4PL, but also a combination of 3PL. So we jokingly call it 3.5PL. And that is just kind of a true strategic supply chain management that we provide for quite a few Fortune 500 companies now.
Tariffs, duties, and trade compliance all continue to be hot topics in logistics. How does Logistics Plus help importers and exporters navigate these complex and ever-changing challenges?
That's a great question. And, just over the last week or so, the tariffs have kind of taken the back seat because of the virus. But prior to that, we have an entire compliance department that specializes in customs and tariffs and in advising our customers on how to minimize the impact of these tariffs on them, how to properly navigate them, and, whether it's just classifications, whether it's, getting binding rules from U.S. Customs on their behalf, or advising them that, in order for them to remain competitive, they need to shift certain manufacturing capabilities to other countries. So, that is something that we've been working very, very closely with our customers. For some of them, the impact of tariffs were tremendous. And, they wanted to see what could be done to minimize those, what are their other options available. So our entire department has worked on that, and under Adam and Gretchen have been spending days in and days out in providing the consultancy services on the effects of the tariffs, how to properly deal with it, and like what else could be done in order to minimize the impact on the customer's business.
What do current air and ocean rates look like right now, and how does Logistics Plus help shippers avoid paying more than they should for international shipping services?
That's another very good question, and it's almost impossible to overlook the coronavirus effect on this, because when the factories have been closed, not much freight has been moving. The rates temporarily dip because simply there was a lot of capacity, not much freight. As some of the factories are starting to kind of ship again, as a lot of the backlog for shipping and a lot of the material is started to move in China towards the ports and airports, the pricing is going up simply because now there is not enough capacity to support. So it's it's interesting how it's affected, but we see short term as the rates going up. But long term, I think because of potential recession and potential slowdown, we feel that the rates might actually then go down, at some point in a few months, just because there will be less freight moving, and there's always that gap where between the steamship lines kind of adjusting their capacity based on the need of the cargo. So if there is an economic slowdown, there will be more capacity, and that will drive some of the prices down. So ultimately, we feel that the rates will continue to go up short term and go up significantly. And once everything kind of goes back to normal, if the economy goes into somewhat of a recession or a slowdown or a plateau, at that point we see the rates as actually will be probably going down.
Project cargo management and the movement of large, oversized shipments is another specialty solution that Logistics Plus provides globally. Can you share anything interesting going on with that division?
Yeah, we continue to grow in that regard. We continue to service the large contract with Indian Railways that Wabtec Yuriy has for delivery of 1,000 locomotives over the next 10 years. We have also grown a lot on the rail side of the U.S. business, where we move large, oversized pieces all over the country and all over North America via rail. We've hired a few industry professionals with specific skills, such as rail and a few other kind of very distinct heavy lift capabilities. And that's one of the areas that we continue to grow. That's one of the areas that we see a lot of opportunity. So we continue to invest in that side of the business and continue to see good returns.
Can you foresee rail being a bigger part of what Logistics Plus does down the road?
It's hard to say. I don't know if it could be a much bigger part of what we do, but it certainly will be a key element of the overall service offerings. So when something is coming in, a large oversized piece coming in on a boat from, let's say, China or Brazil, then, we now have ability to put it directly on rail and take it, into its final destination, whether it's to a barge or whether it's to, somewhere in the middle of the country. So it adds to the total capabilities of Logistics Plus. And, although I see a lot of growth in that specific area, I don't know if it's going to be, this massive side business, but I think it's going to help us overall in the project cargo world to grow and to, continue to handle these complex projects that many times require many different modes of transportation to be, very closely coordinated.
Warehousing and fulfillment is also a growing segment for Logistics Plus, isn't it? Anything new to report in that area?
Yes, honestly, e-commerce has been absolutely growing at a tremendous speed in the United States and around the world. And that's an area that's growing a lot for Logistics Plus. We have invested heavily in technology, in infrastructure. We have quite a few new customers. One of our main facilities in Olean, New York. We recently moved to a bigger and better facility. We have a few new large customers and are kind of continuing to grow that. And also we are getting heavier into fulfillment overseas. And I don't know if many U.S. consumers realize, but fulfillment and e-commerce overseas is actually not as developed and not as easy as it is in the United States. And, there is a lot of challenges with services like, comparable services like Amazon Prime, even in Europe, or specifically in some of the other places. So we are very actively working overseas as well on the fulfillment and on the e-commerce, and just kind of really trying to develop this into one of our core business divisions for the whole company worldwide.
Yuriy, is there anything new to report on the technology front? Are you seeing any traction with blockchain or artificial intelligence applications?
Yeah, great questions. Over the last few years, we are becoming more and more of a tech company on top of being a logistics company. We have invested tremendous amount of capital, tremendous amount of human capital into development of some of our systems. Our main platform is mylogisticsplus.net, which has become and grown into its own ERP system that is powered by a mobile app and kind of allows our customers to do everything from tracing and tracking their freight to being able to pick products out of our warehouses to being able to, through our business intelligence systems, to view their entire supply chain, total spend, total landed cost. One side business that and side portion of our software that's been custom developed for the co-working and for the FF&E market is the side that allows kind of for LP, for My Logistics Plus, to be used as a virtual shop where any customer or a project manager can just go in and then look at pictures of various products in our warehouses with actual cost of these products tied to it, and then just drop and drag them onto these very cool kind of 3D maps of whether it's offices or specific project requirements, and then to be able to execute that order and start receiving the freight at their location. So really have put in a lot of kind of thought and development into this, and some of these products are the only ones currently available on the market and have really kind of been our competitive advantage. And to the second portion of the question, there hasn't been that much development on the blockchain, but on the AI, there's certainly new developments all the time. We are pioneering and beta testing quite a few different services, and our motto has been that we don't want to be just simply the followers in the market. We don't even want to be the early adopters. What we are for some of these new technology platforms are the beta testers, where we kind of go in and help the designers to see what are some of the flaws, what are some of the what additional functionality might be needed, and take that to market and offer it before majority of the other companies will. So we have a very kind of aggressive outlook on the IT side of our business, because we see the IT side being the absolutely crucial side and crucial aspect of our growth.
Are there any new or interesting clients that you can discuss with us? Is Google still one of your growing customers?
Yes, Google is one of our growing customers, and we do forward logistics, reverse logistics, and as Google continues to grow worldwide on the small hardware on their phones, and with Google's recent purchase of a few companies, including Fitbit, there's been tremendous amount of growth for us. And we are doing more and more for them, including kind of the more sophisticated stuff like specifically providing them the total landed cost, and them using our BI capabilities that allow them to kind of keep a finger on the pulse of their entire distribution network in various portions of the country, in various types of their businesses, which there's probably 4 or 5 just different core businesses within them. So that's definitely a very cool kind of and growing customer. We continue to do a lot with GE Aviation, and we have quite a few big and new customers, specifically on the cloud computing side, on the on the cloud storage side, certain kind of complex services like being the importer of record in various countries where, certain U.S. companies either don't have their own presence or don't want to open their own presence. We provide them with an importer of record service. We provide them with all the necessary licensing on the U.S. side. We provide them with all the necessary importing licensing at each individual country's side. And just really, these are the more complex shipments. These are shipments that may contain 800 to 900 different parts. These are the shipments that take 2 to 3 months to move because of complexity of the licensing and everything else. So, that's one side of our business as well. It's been growing, and that's a kind of a very, very sophisticated white glove type, very high quality, high service, very, very heavy on documentation side of our business.
As we've discussed repeatedly in recent segments, the growth of Logistics Plus over the past few years has been off the charts. Do you think 2020 will be another banner year for the company?
Honestly, I think so. I do think that, depending on how the whole, how long the coronavirus scare will last, and but so it's hard to predict that, but we absolutely feel confident that this is going to be another great year. We're going to continue to kind of do what we do, and in all honesty, I mean, use the even something as bad as coronavirus as something to to continue to provide the service to our customers. And while again others might be just kind of waiting it out, we're going to be there aggressively trying to find better ways and trying to help our customers and continue to try to grow. So as I think you and I have had this discussion before, that in 2008. During the recession, when the stock market crashed and everything else, we were one of the very few companies that came out of the recession, and we actually grew, and we were very profitable. And that's because, everybody was counting every penny. Everybody was trying to make sure that they run the most effective, cost-effective supply chain, and we came in and we were still very aggressive on sales, and we were very aggressive with our value to our customers, and we actually were one of the very few companies that grew, and we will continue to do that through the coronavirus outbreak, and I firmly believe that we will have another great year in 2020.
Do you see any challenges or opportunities upcoming this year?
Well, we have daily and weekly challenges. There is, with such quick development of tech, and constantly hear about Amazon coming in, and now they are their own large logistics company with their own fleet. And you have the Uber Freight and the equivalents of that freight of those type of companies that pop up kind of every so often. And there's a lot of reliance on tech. And for us, there's a lot of different companies that still operate like they did 20 years ago, printing bill of ladings, picking up the phone. And then there's a lot of new companies that claim that their software can move everything. And and we try to position ourselves, and we act as a company that does both. So we have the world-class technology platforms, but we also have that old logistics mentality where we will roll up our sleeves, pick up a phone, and don't hang up until we get a yes. So it's kind of when the old meets the new, and there's certainly still room for both. And to be a complete kind of logistics company, supply chain provider, you need both. So so that's the continuous direction of the company at this point.
Any final thoughts that you'd like to mention?
No, it's just that it's gonna be very tough to predict the coronavirus and what effects it will have. It can kind of die down and resume back to normal by mid-May, but this could drag out over the summer, and there could be once the weather gets worse, there could be another outbreak. So it's really tough to predict, and a lot of it is speculation. So, just kind of need to be nimble, need to, look for different opportunities to provide the most value, and kind of have a plan, a short-term plan and a long-term plan, the worst-case scenario and best-case scenario. And, it seems like it's going to be closer to the worst-case scenario than it is to the best-case scenario.
Thanks for listening to Business Spotlight on Money Radio WPSE. Business Spotlight is heard Fridays at 12:30 p.m. Join us again next week as Dr. Ford is in the Business Spotlight.